Okay, so I wanted to just run through what I did on the Renderdome the other day because a couple of people asked to sort of see the whole process of how I did everything. And I'm going to redo it as live and as from memory as I can and try to explain why I did everything I did. So, to recap, we have this shot here, which is just a pretty standard green screen, and we need to remove this highlight over here in the background and then comp a screen into the shot. Red pen says also to remove the little tape on the bottom and just this sort of smudgy schmutz on top. In addition to that, they want to stabilize all of these 5 webcam people, because if you see, they're all bouncing around. So the first thing I want to do anytime I get a clip like this is just get a track off it so I can see how stable I can get it. So I go just to a regular old action and I bring out the mono analyzer, which is the old camera tracker. And it's, I don't think anybody's going to argue it's the world's best, but it's pretty good. So I said turn on forward, backward, and 3D motion, because I know it's a 3D motion shot. Sometimes the tracker will create a solution that thinks it's a pan when it's actually not. So if you know it's not a pan or you know it is a pan, it's good to define that when you run the track. And it's at 75% now, up to 85. We're really cooking along here with this Rec 709 HD shot. I've got an error rate of 5, which I don't put a ton of stock in error rates, but it's worth looking at things that are moving, right? So it's tracking all of the stuff on the bouncing hand, and none of that's going to be good. So I'm just going to go over and delete all these points in the fine tuning section and rerun the track, and it's still got a couple of exciting points, so I'm going to just wind up the quality setting until some of the real obvious culprits get selected. Delete those, hit update. Now we're down to 2. There's still, I don't know what this is picking up, so I pick that point. At some point, yeah, a little tracker is going to turn red. So I'm just going to get that with the short setting, which is, it just deletes trackers that aren't on the screen for very long. Update that again. Now we're at 2.9. Things that are bad. This is bad. This is obviously correspondingly bad. Most of these mid-screen bits aren't going to be of much use. This is arguably of use, but I don't care. I'm deleting these because I think they confuse the issue. 2.74. And now this is not what I would call an award-winning number, but this is where I start to, especially in a Renderdome setting, say, you know what, this is probably fine. And so now what I want to do is I want to pick points that are, this one, little jerk, right? No, not that guy, not you. You, no? Yeah, you. Okay. This guy looks a little funky, so I'm just gonna, he's just gonna travel all over the place. That's pretty trash. These two are sliding. Because I just want something pretty good. These two, they're no good. And I find you just, by just deleting some of the sort of obvious non-physical points in the space, you can usually get a track to, work pretty well. I think this guy's eyebrow probably not helping matters. Really, none of those are helping matters. This seems to be wrong. And I'm just deleting these points you know, there's a moderate amount of science here, but it's also just kind of like, I don't know, I don't like where that one's moving. And for the Renderdome, I think this is all I did. Ironically, I just hit update again, and it gave me a slightly better number. But, you know, how much you trust that number is arbitrary. Deleting these guys because I don't think they're attached to real things. My number went up. Is that a problem, though? I don't know. So I'm going to say that's good enough. And I'm going to pick just a couple of points on here that I feel define the sort of the front and the back of the screen. I only picked 3 in the Renderdome. I'm going to define a few more here now. Create axes, and then I'm going to go and import, in action, import FBX model of a sphere. Doesn't matter which sphere. I grab that one. And then just make it a child of all of those, which is going to make this, so when we look out of the camera, all of those spheres are going to sit on that sort of screen plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale them all down a bit. And now I'm going to add just another card. Well, I already have one, so I don't need to add another one. I will add just a card layer here in Flame. So turn priority off. Boom, boom. Add this in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at where those are all placed. So I'm going to go and say, all right, like this one right here looks like it's sort of at the bottom. And I'm going to rotate until you see how I can make all these spheres a more obvious color. So I want to just make all the spheres sort of bisected roughly evenly, because that's going to tell me that this image is sort of coplanar. And I like to use a couple of, when I'm doing this sort of thing, I like to use a couple of axis nodes, because otherwise your rotations get really wonky. Whereas if I do this, I can kind of, well, so let me do something better here. Let me make the actual pivot point that sphere. And so I look at the top view, side view, yeah, cool, good enough. And then I rotate this until it's sort of coplanar in what we'd consider the sort of broad Z direction going back into the scene. And then I add a second axis to rotate this until it cuts through those other spheres. I can just scale this up. And now this is where you can see my solution is obviously far from perfect, so I'm just going to kind of wing it and say that I like the 2 back spheres better than I like the front one. So I'm going to bisect that, and then I'm going to go back and I think just twist this a little bit. So now I've got the corner spheres. This webcam sphere is a little off, but the track for that was kind of the worst of any of them anyway. So these are all sort of bisected nicely, and then I'm just going to add one more axis to make the screen more centered. So if we just do this and we scale this down and maybe we rotate it a little bit, so it's sort of, and you can even see in here that the perspective lines, I mean, they're even worse than I did in the Renderdome, which will become blatantly obvious in a second. But I'm still just going to roll with this because this is all about the sort of real-time nonsense and what you do with it. So I am going to then, same image card, add to diffuse map and set it to texture, projection, camera 1. Camera 1 being the tracked camera right here. And then I'm also going to take, I'm going to go back to the source card, just drag a camera out and call this flat camera. You can name it whatever you want, but now if I add an output, just do this little chain, and if I change the result camera to flat camera, you get a straight on view of the screen. And now you can see this is not perfect. I honestly got a better solution out of my Renderdome run, but whatever. We're going to roll with this, and I'll show another little trick to sort of tidy this up. So now I've got my stabilized image, and I'm going to make a second action to stabilize it further. So we'll call this camera stabilize. We'll call this bilinear stabilize. So I'm just going to use a bilinear because you could also use a perspective, but I find perspective tries to be very technically correct, and we're no longer in a technically correct physical space, because if we were, this would be a perfect rectangle. It's not. So I'm just going to leave it at bilinear, and I'm going to go to the F8 view, and I'm just going to frame up the corners. So the F8 view shows you the UVs of the surface you're on versus the vertices. If we hit F4, we'll go back to the vertices, and you'll now see that it's just straight up full screen. And if I scale this down, sort of, you can see, scale this down, and then what is it? The auto expand? Yeah, there you go. So you just expand this out and it'll redraw the image. But now I've got it as a perfect rectangle. But you can see it sort of wavers here towards the end. So I can fix that too by going back to the F8 view, and I sort of scroll along and I go, all right, that's... And I just adjust these as needed. And, you know, you can get really serious with this and sort of do like a planar track or something like that. And, you know, you could argue, well, if you're just going to do a planar track, why didn't you do it pre-camera track? And, you know, there's an argument for that. But I find this sort of multi-track method just allows you to remove some of the problems so you can focus on other problems and sort of continue down the chain that way. So again, I didn't do this part in the Renderdome, but it's probably pretty close to a better practice to do. But, you know, I'm also not going to make half the silly paint mistakes, or I'm just going to talk my way through them. So there's that. All right, so now I got that, so I'm pretty happy with it. And now if we scrub at the screen, it's pretty good. You know, it's a little wobbly, but I don't know. Put my finger on that. It's okay. It's okay. We're just going to say it's fine. So now I've got something that I can paint on to clean up the tape on the bottom and the smear on the top. And so what I ended up doing in the Renderdome, after sort of trying to paint the bottom a bunch of times, but I didn't have it perfectly flat, is I just did a blur node. So I just, drew a little box around the area that I wanted to blur, like so. And because I'm just blurring it sideways, it kind of doesn't matter. If I pick up some of this other crap. So then I just take a comp node, multiply those two together, so I've just got the blur. And then I did a directional blur because it wasn't completely flat, so I'll continue that. So I set the bias to 0, so it'll blur in both directions at the same time. If the bias defaults to 1, it just blurs, in one direction. I wish it was set to 0, because this is usually what I want to do. And then the nice thing about a directional blur is if you are just a little off axis, you can rotate it to get it. But for this, I think I did a pretty good job of staying on axis this time. And so now I will just comp again, and I will set the incoming to pre-mult and the out to unpre-mult. At which point, I can then just comp this over this through the original matte. So there's my blur, and it gets rid of that. And now I blurred it a little too much, so you can see the matte edge there. I don't know, but good enough for government work. Now, you know, again, in a perfect world, I'd also get rid of the little highlight that's running across there, but whatever. Like, maybe that's just lighting. It really depends on how much time you have and how much your clients care, because you can easily sink a day or two into a shot like this if you want to really do that. And if everybody just wants you to get the screen out the door, then maybe they're fine with that. All right, so now we've got our sort of stabilized image. We painted that out. I'll deal with the schmutz on the top in a second, but I want to check that I can get this all back. And so what I do there is I copy the camera stabilize, hook up just the original plate, and what I usually like to do is, when I'm checking this originally, is I'll just go and I'll just color correct the source image like pink or something. So now I've got a pink source image, and if this is all working correctly, I just need to apply my pink image, which in this case, because it's the same layer, back to this and throw away the camera and the surface. And you can see that it all sits in there just fine. Now I complicated matters because I added a second axis with a scale down and a funky bilinear. So this is how we're going to deal with that, I think. Duplicate that again. Again, plug in the back. They should have the same back. Well, eventually I'm going to use my comp here. I just want to, you know, show how you check this. Without that, again, we'll just color it, you know, whatever. This one will be yellow. It doesn't matter. And in the UV point section, we're going to say, send this to the vertices. And then we're going to reset the UVs. And we can also turn off the auto expand because we don't need that anymore. But the other thing you can see is that the image is too small because I did a scale down back in here so we could get more of the image around the outside for our work. This is going to create a funky problem. So, and you can see if I just scale it up here, it doesn't line up, which is a problem. So how do we solve that? And one way would just be to scale it up before it goes back into the UVs, which we can do 2D transform, scale over here 72, so we'll just do 100 or 10,000 divided by 72. Gives us the inverse scaling. And that did not work because I'm a doofus. So, all right, let's go fix this differently and see if it works. I've done this before, but it's not something I like, because usually what I'll do is I'll just set the UVs a little nicer. So maybe let's just do that. If I just set the UVs at the outside of the frame here, I won't have any of these silly problems. I will have to redo my little blur fix, but who cares? That's not exactly brain surgery. All right, so now we've got enough of a border that this all looks acceptable, and I'm just gonna, again, do a couple of sloppy keyframes. You know, the way around this is get a better camera track than I got, so you get it when you sort of unproject, as it were, the screen, it becomes a perfect rectangle, and I just can't be bothered to do that. You know, I'm putting this silly video together on my weekend, and you know, 6 people are going to watch it. So I don't want to pretend that I'm making real art here. All right, so now we've got, again, the whole screen, and I'm just going to reset the scale because undoing scales is kind of a pain with this methodology. So there you go. Now I've got that screen, and again, we're just going to go, shit, yeah, it'll be fine. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know. Animation keep. Make sure that doesn't travel around, and then sure enough, the blur, it's fine. All right, so then again, all we're going to do here is duplicate this, pick up the same back, media, extract for layer 1, we'll pick up the front, but you know, for proof, we'll color it all pink. And all I'm going to do here is in the UV points, I'm going to send them to the vertices, and I'm going to reset them. And now this all lines up. I mean, it's disco colors, but it lines up because you're just resetting the source UVs back to the corners and sending their position to the vertices, which are the output geo, and it'll reverse your sort of UV stabilization. And as long as you leave the UVs in your first image in the corners, this is all fine. It becomes a real headache if you change the UVs and the vertices. That's a whole different can of worms, and to get it to work is just frankly more trouble than it's worth, so I don't recommend doing that. So we've got our camera track, and then we can just send it back to the stabilize, and now we've got a viable image that if we take off the disco stuff and we just, you know, say put in a text node or something. Should name this batch or no. Redo. Just before the text node crashes everything or something. Because it's the old text node. Everybody loves a nice soft drop shadow, so I'll do that. And now you can see we've got something that is tracking pretty well to the screen. So this is functionally how you would track everything. So this would be the bilinear destabilize. And this is the cam destabilize. I spelled those correctly. So what I want to do is I need to generate my screen comp, which I want to do on this shape, and then I can track it through here and apply effects to it, and then I also want to do my cleanup. So my cleanup is already right here. There's a mux node. Boink. And for the little cleanup up here, what I did before is a paint node. I can see already that this is bopping around a little bit, so I'm just going to add some supplementary actions to stabilize and destabilize that, which again I did not do in the original Renderdome, but I think it's a useful technique for those of you who like to work in a hasty environment such as this. Just a couple of actions to sort of track stuff, and it's all bumping around, so I'm going to leave the auto update reference on, and so I just keyframed past that one. Every time the little shadow blips through, I'm just going to go past that frame, and then if you just adjust the tolerance, it tends to pick up the little place where you were. I don't know why this guy has to keep waving his dang pen around. Alright, so that's good, and then I'm just going to look at the animation channel and see where it's getting overly excited. And you can see these little jumps right here. The other thing you can do is just watch it. Stabilized, and it, yeah, so it jumps right there. And then it kind of stays in the same place, right? And so if we look at the X position, you can actually see it down here, it just jumps down. So I'm just going to grab all this crap right here and then just move it up. Just kind of pretend like, yeah, that's all fine. Let me delete that keyframe. And then you see it jumps back there, so I'm just going to delete those keys. And now it's pretty stable. You know, I mean, again, I could do a lot better job. Anybody could, but we're being hasty. So now I'm just going to go and set this to drag, set this to sequence. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to paint up and sort of in a little bit, so that the reason I'm doing that is because this reflection is the big problem that's moving through here. And I don't want to go and tidy up each frame where it's a problem. I know I did that in Renderdome, but I ended up throwing it out because it's just kind of a pain in the butt. So rather than doing that, I'm just going to go and just set to smear. No, we want drag, man. And just drag this all the way up, broadly, you know, in alignment with the way that reflection moves. And I'm going to cheat it a little bit here, so this is going to sort of coalesce over that webcam dot. There's a million ways you could do this, and the other way would just be to paint out the webcam dot, just like Gmask it back in, which is probably a better way to do it. But I'm just going to say that's fine here. You know, that's a little ugly, but I can just do this. And even though it's not like perfect, it's probably not going to look bad enough to be a real problem in the comp. And so that's my paint there. I need to destabilize that. And usually when I'm doing this, I don't sort of do double duty of recomping these things onto themselves in these stabilized things. So I'll just leave it like that, and then when I plug it into this action, well, actually I'm gonna put it together with this other guy here. So all of our little beauty fixes will be combined into one action. So that's just, let me roll Gmask around this guy. Boom, 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 boom. I could have just used a comp node, but there's a very real chance I'll have more crap to do. And then I just sort of soften the mask off a little bit. And just for fun, I mean, this doesn't really matter because we're already softening the image pretty heavily on here. And then there we go. We've got, you know, a cursory attempt at cleanup. Could be better. It's not going to be better. It's not the way I did it, so I don't want to be lying about stuff. And then I can see there's even some crap over there, so I'll just go back to my paint node and just push all that up. And then that is the cleanup done, which, you know, honestly could be better. I think I said that about 19 times now. It's just the chorus I'm going to sing. And now I want to do the screen comp, so what I'm going to do is taking that same output from the bilinear stabilize, I'm just going to take the shot and I'm going to make it transparent so I can see both at the same time, and then just kind of scale it in until it looks okay. So, and I acknowledge the scale is not proportional. That's because a lot of times when you do these sort of camera stabilizes, things, you know, again, I don't do a perfect job, so everything's a little bit wonky. But I try. All right, so I'm placing these guys, and I just want to make sure that they kind of overlap the green. Now I'm just going to cheat it with a little bit of a bilinear, but the other thing I want to do is make sure that they don't get too close to the edge, because I'm going to blur this, and that's going to look really bad if I blur past the edge of the image. Although actually it doesn't matter in this shot because I'm going to comp it in situ. So now we've got all of our webcam people nicely compositives. So now I can just make them a second layer in my bilinear destabilize just by copying this, linking those two, and then for my output, I'm just going to make one clean screen and another one screen content. So clean screen is going to be this, and screen content is going to be this. So it's just going to output those two things. I'm also going to make a gradient that I want to roughly comport to this, and you know, I'll just make it a linear gradient just like that, and I'll make this yet another party to this. Now again, I didn't use this bilinear destabilize business in the Renderdome, and if you get a better track than I did this time, you won't need to either. W link that. But what the gradient does is make it a little bigger. It allows you to pull a use it as a fake depth map, basically. All right, so you don't get to be a member of that. Come on. There you go. And then we'll just call this grad. And again, the gradient is just a depth map. And I don't want it to. So we've got our cleaned up screen, our screen content, which I'm going to turn off the background for, which means I'm also going to turn off the background here. And our depth map, which, you know, I don't think that black's going to be an issue. We'll find out in a second. And I just plug all of these into my destabilize. And all I need to do is just they're all identical clips. And in this setup, they're just like default surfaces. They're not doing anything special. So long as they're all hanging off the same thing, they will be in the right place. And then, again, I'm going to output all of these. So, screen content, screen contenty, and grad. And for both the grad, which is hidden, and the clean screen, I just want them on black. Or for the screen content, I want them on black. And then for the cleanup, I want it over the background. So, over the background. So it's basically just the comp shot. Now I've got all the elements I need to pull a key and apply a depth map. So I am going to get a master keyer and a matchbox node called, what is it? Croc additive key. So with a master keyer, I'm just going to pick the clean screen, all three layers, and I'm going to pick the greens and just change this to front CC. And my only goal with this is just to make this gray, like the despill, which it's doing a pretty nice job of. There's a little bit of fringing in here. I'm not going to care about that, but you can watch the last time I was on Logic Live to see how to fix that. And then you plug in just three things, the screen content, so green screen into the first input, despill into the second input, and your screen into the third input. You turn on enable Joel's version, and then you just start sliding these numbers around. In linear, I tend to wind blend BG up all the way. Here, I clearly don't need to. And then I usually just use the offset. The gamma is, you know, just like a color correct gamma. And it's, you know, it's all right. But you can see it's kind of out of focus, or it should be out of focus. So what we do is we get another matchbox. This one is the Y lens blur right here. We take our screen content and the grad, and we set the gain back to 1. And now if we look at this shot, sometimes you can look at like a lens, an out of focus bit of lens, and see what shape the bokeh is. And this looks basically like a circle. These all look like little circles. They don't look like they have individual facets. So we just want a lot of sides on our lens. So we'll give it 10 sides. That's pretty circly. See, there's the shape I'm making. Whereas if you have fewer sides, it makes like a box. And there's a little bit of noise to it. But 10 will give it a nice circly defocus. Turn off that. And now I just can change the focal point. And if I should set a context back here on the source image. Focal point is kind of right in the middle where that woman is. Cool. One thing my wife pointed out to me when I did this comp, which is exactly like this, I made it too out of focus. So I'm going to try not to this time, not that my wife's going to watch this video. But yeah, I think I had it set to 2. Well, no, not 10, 2. And yeah, just too much. And I would say, 1's okay, but probably even still a bit much. We just kind of want it to fall off a little bit. So we'll go with 0.7 there, and I'm just going to be happy about that. But now, because the gradient and everything's tracked in, the focal point should sort of stay where you need it. And if you need to animate it, you can do that. With this focal point slider. It's really handy. But I'm just going to kind of keep it, wherever it was. And that's the basic comp. And now the other things to do, there's the stabilizing each of an individual person, and then despilling his hand. And now the nice thing about the hand despill is the master keyer already did it for us. So all I need to do is roto that guy's hand back over my comp, because the comp is bringing in this black and is making his hand too dark. One thing I did in the Renderdome that I think was frankly overkill is I took the screen comp from when it was a full screen. I just blurred it a whole bunch to get a kind of color of it. And then I added that to the shot. To give the hands the color of the screen. Now the truth is, with a shot like this, it's pretty white-ish, multicolored-ish. It's not going to give a very specific cast, so I think that was just silly overkill. And I'll leave it here. But the really important thing is just to make a G mask. And just roto the area that's a problem. We're just going to do this. You do have to watch out with spill suppression. It'll make certain colors change. One thing, and I noticed this in my Renderdome, I did not restore the green of this plant. So that was pretty dumb of me, but it happens. But sometimes you'll see suit colors. If you're doing blue screens a lot, you'll see a suit like this go gray, but it doesn't really look obvious. You kind of got to chase it down. Pay attention to that stuff. So, and then I'm just going to combine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this matte to just take the master keyer color and just apply it over, and now you can see all the dark stuff goes away. And then if I do want to do my little goofy add, I can just do that again by taking this color and then combining this matte with this matte, which if we set this to inside, then you get just the sort of lit up fingers area. And we can set that to add or screen because we're in. And you know, that adds a little light bounce. And if, you know, the color was, for example, something silly, you could get different colored light bounces out of, you know, this little blurry bullshit. Who cares? You know, it's a thing you can do. It's just a way to cheat it. It's all just ways to cheat it. So now I've got most of my comp done. Things still left to do are remove that very bright thing in the background and stabilize the people. So let's do the background. I tend to find that I will work backwards in comps like this, so I don't have to pre-comp things as much. I'll solve a problem and then I'll move backwards, and then I get all of my real-time speed again versus having to wait for all of this to process just for a silly little paint node that I want to deal with. So here, what I did, just stabilized a piece of it. I think I wanted to stabilize where it meets this corner because that allows me to paint the corner down, even though it is not, strictly speaking, a correct point. If I stabilize it right there, all of my vertical paint strokes are gonna work nicely. So then I just hit invert on that, turn off the background, and we go to a paint node, set the sequence, set this to drag, shout out to Josh Lawrence, paint is always a drag, and then I just drag this down, drag this across. I think I dragged across first because then I can go into this problem area, right? And again, you could paint this better than I am. And then I just drag this down. And so now it's gone. And there's a million ways you could do this. You could do this with a patch. I did it with a paint stroke because paint is fast most of the time. And that looks fine. That's basically what I would say. Duplicate the action. Pick up the paint node. You could, you know, pick up the matte. The paint node generates a matte. But I, in situations like this, often like to just make my own G-mask because it's already stabilized. So drawing a G-mask doesn't take a lot of work. So I will just hanging off the shape. Add a mask. Boom, 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 boom. I'll invert it, unhide that, and then there we go. We've got that bit painted out. Just plug that into the comp. So that bit's done now. And now the only thing left to do is to stabilize these people, which is kind of a whatever. Took me longer than I wanted, but also. So I'm going to make multiple image layers. And I don't actually need to because they're all the same thing. I don't know. It sort of helped me think about it in my mind. And I suppose if I needed to do any individualized color correction for a person, and then I just organize them like they are on the screen. So I need to do all the ones in the left row and all the ones in the top row. That means that this guy is the upper left guy, this is the lower left woman, etc., etc. And that's just a way for me to keep them straight in a way that I just have to think a little bit less. So then I draw a G-mask rectangle, and I can never draw these perfectly, so what I try to do is I try to get one edge nice, and then I select and I go to the vertices tab, and then I can move 2 vertices at a time, and that'll guarantee that I'm always getting straight lines. Because if I did this by hand, you know, there's just a very good chance that my lines are going to be kind of junk. So there we go. Now we've got a box for that guy, and so then we just I'm going to hide everybody else. This box needs to be inverted to mask just this guy, and we'll do a Command or Alt G Gmask link, so this Gmask only affects this guy, and then on this axis we'll just hit Enter Tracker, and I'm just going to pick some random crap in the background. I'm going to turn off Auto Update Reference because it doesn't move a lot, doesn't change a lot. I just want to get a sort of as steady a track as I can. Alright, so now I've got that guy, and now I need to hit invert to stabilize him. And now it looks like I got him back, but I actually didn't. He's really far away. So I'm going to make a second axis above that, I think above that, and just put him back into place. And now we'll see how he goes. And so we need to scale him up a little bit because you can see it, the image coming in over here on the left. So we'll do 105. And again, this is all on the action that is above the axis that is above the stabilization axis. You want to do it on a separate one so you don't have to keyframe it every single time. So now he's stable and in the frame, but I think he can be framed a little better, and I want to get that black bar back to where it is, because I think this guy specifically, this camera just kind of pans sideways. There's a little bit of raising in the black bar, but we're just going to pretend we don't see that, and that guy's done. And so we move down to, and then I can just duplicate my Gmask, link it to the next one, and bring it down to make my next window. And unhide this. Again, we go in, we track. Just want to track some, whatever's in the background. Not a moving person's head, just, some lights or whatever, and that's going to do it for this. And then we are going to make sure to invert this, and then we're going to add a second axis. Just going into that. Bring it back over. And you can hit Y on the second axis to sort of center it on our face. And then hit M. We're going to need to scale this up, say 110, so it doesn't bounce around. And then just scrub back and forth. And that seems tolerable. That seems all right. So that's 2 down. We again duplicate this, link it to another one of these people, and once again move the shape down. And this one's a little different because it seems to be a different size for whatever reason. That's fine. We can change these things. So I just again grab the bottom 2 vertices and I use the vertices menu to move them versus a sort of GUI menu. And then we can ignore the, I don't know why that guy is in the frame. Why are you over here, buddy? What image is this? Oh, that's not a G link. That was a regular link. There we go. Again, go into the stabilizer, pick a point in the background, hit go. And like with the guy at the top, I felt that this one didn't move enough in the north-south region to worry about that. So my goal with the repo for this one, again, is just to get that black bar to line up and have her head look all right. So invert the track, go to the above axis, put her back broadly where she is, hit Y to sort of center on her, and we'll just go do another 110 scale, line up the black bar, and we sort of scrub back and forth. And again, there's a little bouncing on the black bar, but it's up to you if you care about that. You could try grading it out That never works for me, but I know people do it with a tremendous amount of success. All right, now we're going to do the top center woman. Again, we just take our wonderful G mask that we've used 98 times already, slide it over, boom, boom. Kill the keyframe we made for all you auto key off folks. And once again, we're going to stabilize it. See if that works as a point. Seems to. All right. Go to the axis, invert it, add a second axis. Bring the woman back to front and center. Hit the Y to center it on her face. Again. Now with this one, I want to make sure I get the whole black bar out of frame. And then I want to scrub through to make sure it never comes in frame. So we've done that. All right, cool. One more of these glorious things to do, and then we'll rebuild a black bar and hit render, and that'll be the end of the show. Hopefully it was worth the price of your admission. Once again, another one of these boxes, move it over, drop it on the last woman, hit space tab to really, oh Jesus Christ. What did I do? Is it just regular tab? Alt tab? There it is. Control tab. No? I don't know what I did. Anyway, hope you enjoyed me messing up as much as I do. Once again, go into the tracker. Find a thing in the background that looks trackable and track it. Exit out. Invert that axis you just tracked. Make another one. And move the lady back to her space. Hit Y to center on her face. And then scale it up a bit. Again, until the black bar is fully gone, because the shot's too bouncy. It's not just like a left or right one where we can get away with the black bar. Alright, and that's great. And now we just need to make a black bar, so that's very easy. You make a colored source node that is black. And you just move it over these two, scale it out till it's just like that big. And then you just adjust the transparency to taste. And then the very last thing I did was get the meeting ID from there. So I used a matte edge node like a histogram. So I just went to an area where I think this was reasonably dark. I think her hair is pretty helpful in that regard. But so yeah, we just sort of clamp this down, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to make a second matte edge node, because I just like to stack these, and I'm going to hit Shift W to make the gamma go all the way up. And now you can see these just little bits that I want to get rid of, so I'm just going to pull in the black level a little bit, and then to thicken up the type, I will pull in the white. And this is getting a little crunchy, but also it's going to scale way down and be slightly out of focus, so it does not matter. Make a Gmask tracer, plug in both inputs, just loosely cut out this frame, invert the mask, set the color to black. And now we've got that. Put a mux node in here, freeze the current frame, add this just as a matte, and dial back the transparency to taste. And there you go, you got your meeting ID back in, and that's the end of what I ended up doing in the Renderdome. I just hit render on it. I even left the I'll leave the incorrectly despilled thing. And you can also see my sort of despill matte. If I A/B this, when I'm adding all these things, it's changing the color of the background. These are all things I would probably address in a professional situation, but in a trying to race against my friend situation, I don't know that I would bother. And then you hit render. This one takes about 2 minutes. And it looks nice. You know, the nice thing about the additive keyer is, as you can see, all the glare that's happening on the screen is still preserved. That can be a real kind of pain to address with a normal keying approach. And I think a lot of us, certainly myself, get lost in the weeds using the default keyer and flame because you want to get all that gorgeous softness, and the keyer is dealing in more concrete terms, shall we say, and not helping you any. Whereas the additive keyer, when you set up the Joel mode like that, it just kind of lets you be really stupid with things, and I love it. The downside is you don't have nearly as much control. It's sort of, if you can get it to look nice, which you often can, you're good. And if you can't, well, you gotta figure something out. I can't even see the meeting ID on the shot. Is it there? I mean, I'm assuming it's there. That'd be hilarious. If I didn't plug any of that in, that'd be pretty in character. No, I'm just rambling, I'm sorry. That's what you do when you render. I don't even know if this thing's going to work, and I got to edit out a whole piece of this video where my kid came in to ask me when they could play video games. And then we're going to go get ramen for dinner tonight, because the local brew pub has ramen on Tuesday nights, which I'm quite excited about because I heard it was pretty good. But I don't think they know my ramen standards, so we'll see. We'll see. Man, watching rendering is boring. You know. I feel like the lady in the bottom left is dark. I don't know if I did that. Like if I set a transparency keyframe in there. Don't think I did, but other things I'm noticing that I should deal with is I realistically need to roto the whole pen because it's just full green here, and you can see it's semi-transparent. Now again, for a web competition, that just looks like a reflection, and it looks kind of nice. But if you were actually sort of pixel fucking it, maybe it's a problem. It's technically wrong, but Jesus Christ, we get so lost in the weeds. Please ignore the first frame. Don't know why that happened, but yeah, here you go. That's the comp, complete with the dead plant that I created in the background. I think it looks pretty nice. It's lovely for an hour's work. And yeah, the track's not perfect, but also I don't hate it. Could probably sell it in depending on the client, but also could spend another hour and fix it. So I don't know. I hope that helps somebody, or maybe it's interesting. If it's not, that's fine too. I'm not looking to win any awards here. Yeah, I'm shutting the video off now if I can figure out the hotkey again.